Good day, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're very pleased today because we are bringing back one of our most popular speakers, Erin Light, and her topic is wandering in persons with dementia. And as always, we begin by thanking our generous sponsors who enable us to continue this monthly series. Thank you to Care Choices, Hospice and Palliative Services, O'Connor Mortuary, Caring Companions at Home, and Alzheimer's Orange County. And I'm Kim Bailey from Alzheimer's Orange County, and I'm a program and education specialist, and I'll be your host today. So as you know, these sponsors that I just mentioned are with us monthly and bring us this great information as a service to the community on topics that are relevant for anyone who's caring for an older adult or working with the older adult population. So I think that you're going to be finding that today's presentation is very helpful and useful. And now we will go to introduction of our wonderful speaker. She is Erin Light. She's the Senior Administrator at Silverado Senior Living in San Juan Capistrano. She's a gerontologist with 10 years of experience specializing in dementia care and supporting the needs of older adults. She got her bachelor's in cognitive science from UC San Diego, after which she worked in dementia research in a joint UCSD Veterans Hospital venture researching mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, in older veterans. Erin then obtained her master's degree in gerontology from USC and became the graduate researcher on a joint Silverado Senior Living USC study, exploring the effects of daylight in reducing depression in memory-impaired adults. Erin also holds a residential care for the elderly administrator certification and a dementia care specialist certification. She is an active member of Vance Cesar's leadership development program. Erin's passion for older adults experiencing memory loss stems from supporting a grandparent with dementia in a caregiver role during her adolescence years. Erin has extensive experience hosting support groups for various populations, including family members of individuals with memory impairment. And she also participates in speaking engagements on executive functioning and cognition. Erin is the advisor to all the master's level social workers at Silverado Memory Care Communities nationwide and hosts a company-wide Zoom support group for the general public. So we are so happy to bring you back, Erin, and I am going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's such a pleasure to be back. So thank you, Alzheimer's Orange County, for inviting me again. All right, let's get started. So I'd like to start with an overview of dementia. So we'll start with the basics. Dementia, as many of you know, is an umbrella term that describes a variety of diseases and conditions that causes damage to the brain, resulting in a loss of cognitive ability. It is not a part of the normal aging process. So for many of you who have similar encounters like me where you lose your keys around the house, this is not what we're talking about. This is more of a larger cognitive impact in general. Dementia is slow and progressive. It starts with mild symptoms and it does worsen over time. And lastly, Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. Researchers estimate between 60 and 80% of people living with dementia have Alzheimer's. So under this umbrella of dementia, there's two types. So we have on the left, the irreversible types of dementia, which means that you're not going to recover what you've lost at any point during the disease decline. So for example, Alzheimer's disease, Lewy bodies, frontotemporal dementia, PICS, Parkinson's, many of these are common and you hear about them quite a bit. There are some reversible that can occur from depression, drug interactions, nutritional deficiencies, thyroid disease, infections. It can also be from amnesia from a surgery or perhaps a car crash, head injury. And there's also many other types of dementia, over 120 in total. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the changes associated with Alzheimer's disease. The most common and very most well-known symptom, of course, loss of memory. We also see language and communication changes. So a person experiencing the decline might develop aphasia or inability to word find or word search. Sometimes that's called word salad. Also loss of executive functioning. So your higher level cognitive skills that allow us to control our behaviors. So this can include reasoning, judgment, and abstract thought. So understanding concepts that are not observed physically, such as peace or freedom, for example. Also see changes in visual spatial perception and behavioral changes as well. So we often hear individuals saying, oh, my husband or a spouse or whoever parent is experiencing, they would have never done that, right? And so that's very typical and part of this disease process, unfortunately. And that's a big sign that, yes, this disease is impacting them, because that would not have happened without damage to the brain. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the behaviors that occur in wandering with those who are experiencing dementia. 6 out of 10 people with dementia will wander at some point during their disease process. This is huge. This means that this is very predictive. It will most likely happen at some point, whether a lot or just a little bit, and it can occur very suddenly and without warning. Anybody who has a memory loss and is able to find a way to transport themselves is at risk for wandering. So if you can imagine the habits that we've created over our long lives, right? So most of us, once we get out of high school years, college, we start work, or many of us, if you're not working, you're at home. You're enjoying that after COVID. But if we're working, we are at home, we go to work during the day, and we come home. We do the same thing the next day and the next day, at least 5 days of the week. So we've created this habit of going and coming all day long for years on end, sometimes, decades. So this is really not an unusual occurrence. However, the desire to go is often very nerve-wracking and anxiety-provoking for those of us who are trying to keep them safe. Wandering can occur at any stage of the disease process. You might notice a family member getting lost, perhaps in a grocery store, out and about. You could hear similar stories like that of acquaintance I had, where she went to dinner with her husband and he got up to go use the restroom, and a few minutes went by, a few more minutes went by, almost 45 minutes. So finally she got up to go find him. And as it turns out, after he had come out of the restroom, he went and sat down at another table. He didn't remember that he had come with his wife, and he had ordered another plate of food and just started the dinner over again, because he was at a restaurant and that's the typical route for what you're going to do there. So it's not uncommon, and it is very, very concerning, of course. Brain changes also can cause a person with dementia to become confused and very disoriented, even if in a familiar place. So we often hear, I don't understand why my loved one doesn't recognize the house or the apartment or condo that they're living in right now. So if they're going back in time, they're going to have much stronger memories that haven't been as damaged about their childhood home, or perhaps the home that they first purchased with their spouse when they got married, for example, rather than one that they are recently in, moving from a 2-story to a 1-story. So it's easier for them as they age to get around and enjoy their living independently as long as possible. Okay, so there's quite a few reasons for wandering, which are really important for us to cover up front. Of course, the first one, and most well known, is confusion. So problems with memory loss can cause confusion and disorientation, which leads to that person being unable to recognize where they are or remember why they're there. We also see they might be searching for something. They could look for something familiar, especially if they're in a new environment. This could be if they're hungry or they're thirsty or they need to use the restroom, but they've forgotten what to do or where to go. They could also be trying to escape from a real or perceived threat. So person could become frightened by noise, a stranger, something they have interpreted as fearful. Wandering can be the result of stress or anxiety or too much stimulation. This could be very simple as what we see in our communities a lot of times after somebody's moved in and the holidays come around and they want to bring their loved one home to enjoy a Thanksgiving or a Christmas at home. And sometimes in an environment that used to be very comfortable, where they were the center of attention and very social, they are overwhelmed. It's this very high level sensory overload. They cannot track the conversation, and they oftentimes will get up and say, I want to go home, or I want to go back, or I have to leave, because there's too much going on, and unfortunately their brain's unable to process that properly, which is sad for us as families, right? So knowing this ahead of time and anticipating that could occur is very helpful. Okay, so here's a few more reasons for wandering. Oops, I'm sorry. Reliving the past, right? So as I said about the work schedule, wandering could be linked to very similar types of responsibilities, such as work or picking up children. Can also be from agitation. So some individuals find it comforting to stay in motion. They may be restless or make repetitive movements or pace in one area. And this could also be a side effect of medications. So there's boredom or lack of stimulation. They may be restless due to inactivity. So trying to have small things that are simple that they could do in succession. For example, helping out around the house, perhaps with folding clothes or organizing a toolbox, helping to chop vegetables for a dinner meal. Another reason for wandering, again, as we said, they're searching. They could be looking for a person, place, or an item that was lost. Quite often, if they have gone back in time in their head and the memories that are still intact, such as having children, because that's further back in their memory, we often hear our residents at our community say, I'm looking for my daughter or my son, they're 5 years old, I've lost them. And in reality, their loved one, their daughter, or their son is in their 50s or 60s, right? But to them, that's correct in their head. We want to help enter their reality, and perhaps we can ask more questions. Well, where do you think they might be? If it's Saturday, we might say, they're probably not at school. Maybe they're playing with their friends. And we call this therapeutic retelling. So we want to validate their fear. If any of you have lost a child and somebody's trying you, just calm down and wait, your child's going to be fine. There is no calm in that moment. I can assure you, I have watched people go through that. I do not have kids, but I can only imagine the panic that a parent feels at losing a child. So telling somebody who's older, who's looking for their 5-year-old or 6-year-old or whoever they think is very small, it's not going to help if we are just trying to tell them to calm down or try and distract them with something like food, for example. So we want to look at what drives the desire to wander. And so this quote from Dementia Beyond Disease, for many, the desire to leave reflects a lack of fulfillment of well-being within the living space. When that need is fulfilled, the desire is often eliminated. Repeated attempts to stand, walk, explore, or exit should trigger discussions that look at these as goal-driven actions rather than disease-driven ones. Okay, so especially for our older population, let's take a look at the dangers of wandering. So the first, of course, becoming lost. Very basic. It's very scary for them and us as well. The confusion or disorientation, not knowing where to go or what's needed next. They could be subject to injuries, dehydration, or even death from exposure to harsh weather or various other safety risks. Now, if you're in California and you're saying, what harsh weather? Just know that even 2% of dehydration in an older adult can lead to confusion. So the really cold nights or the really hot days that we've been experiencing in the past couple years, upwards of 90 to 100, those are going to make a much bigger impact on older adults than they will people who are younger and in better health and strength. They can also be mistaken for being on drugs or alcohol if they're encountered by someone who doesn't know about dementia. Thankfully, a lot of law enforcement programs worldwide are training to notice these types of signs in dementia. And sometimes even cities. Sydney, Australia, for example, very early on, about 10, 12 years ago, had started a program for all of their public government workers, including post office personnel, to make sure that they know what's going on and be able to take care of their older generations in their community. And of course, the worst case scenario, right, is our victimization or an older adult being taken advantage of. So how can we best prevent wandering for our loved ones? As I mentioned before, there's may not be a warning sign before the person experiencing dementia wanders for the first time. All it takes is just one large event. So I'll share the story I heard of a loved one, husband and wife, and he was starting to have some mild cognitive impairment. It wasn't too bad, but they had their routine. They got up in the morning, they read the newspaper, they had breakfast, and then she would go to the store, run some errands, and he would go on a 2 or 3 mile jog. And again, he had been doing this for decades, so nothing out of the ordinary. But there came a time when she got home one day and he wasn't there. And it was 103 degrees outside. And so she had to call the police and everybody had to look for him. And somehow he ended up about 6 or 7 miles away. He couldn't find his way back home, even though he had been jogging the same route that he had been for decades. So again, just knowing that this can occur and trying to put some plans or buffering in place as much as we can ahead of time is really important. Supervision, not leaving the person experiencing dementia alone. This is a really difficult one, especially for spouses, because this process creeps up very slowly and you can very quickly find yourself isolated at home with them. You could be ignoring your own health and well-being as well. Stopping lunch dates with friends, maybe not going to church as often. And so I just encourage you, if you are going through this, if you take nothing else from this lecture, please know that your health and your well-being is just as important as your loved ones. And also just realizing that your loved one would want to also take care of you better if they could. So it's difficult to reach out for help, but there is a time when that is very necessary, and you need to be well in order to continue caring for them as well. We also want to ensure basic needs are met, such as toileting, hunger, and thirst. This gets really tricky sometimes because we are all very independent. We've grown up, we've been taking care of ourselves, we can cook dinner, we go to work, we take care of our children, and then all of a sudden there's this person nagging us or reminding us every 5 minutes or so, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you use the restroom? So just some suggestions, because it comes from the goodness of our hearts that we're concerned for our loved ones when we see these warning signs. But instead of saying, for example, let's go to the instead of saying, did you go to the restroom? We can say, let's go to the restroom. So using it as a group approach of let's use the restroom before we go out shopping, or let's wash our hands before we have lunch together, right? So it's not so much of an embarrassment and pointing out something that they might not remember because they feel it. There is a different feeling of being told what to do or being reminded rather than doing it together in a pair, for example. Some other ways to prevent wandering. You can check in with your doctor or their doctor to see if any of the medications may be having an impact. Some drugs, depending on how your body reacts and metabolizes them, can have adverse effects. So they might have the opposite effect. They could be creating dizziness or confusion. So please make sure to report any of those symptoms to the physician within the first few weeks that they're occurring, of course, when you're trialing a new drug. Also looking for visual cues to help them. So again, trying to maintain their independence for as long as possible. For example, if they are having difficulty finding the restroom, maybe we put a sign of a toilet on the door, right? It's not the greatest and the most formal, but if that's going to help them wayfinding, that's going to make a big difference for them. Or perhaps on a laundry basket, we have the words dirty clothes, right? So those are the clothes that they're maybe hopefully not going to go pull from to put on in the morning rather than the usual, which is pulling from the closet. We want to remove items near an exits that are going to prompt leaving, such as a purse, suitcase, coat, or keys. And this is just simply helping them to feel like they are comfortable where they're at, to know that they don't need to go anywhere. Of course, we want to go out with them, but those innate tendencies that they've created, those habits for decades, are still going to be present. We've had very creative discussions about how to support this even at care communities. And this could be also done at home. So for example, maybe you put something that's a favorite of theirs near the door. If they like gardening, maybe you're going to put some gardening tools near the back door so that they go out and they do that rather than trying to leave the house, or cooking, or their favorite TV show on near an exit. Additionally, we want to help them with some involvement, right? So avoiding boredom. We don't want to just have them do repetitive activities that are too easy or too challenging for them. And this, you can also reach out to Alzheimer's Orange County for more examples on this specifically. Calm environment. So providing a safe, uncluttered, quiet surroundings that don't cause overstimulation or agitation. Mail is one of those that we hear a lot about, that they just obsess over the mail or their finances or their checkbook, right? So maybe having those in a separate drawer that's not all over the counter, and having something that's a little bit more positive eliciting available for them to see. Keeping the doors locked, of course, considering a key deadbolt or additional lock that's placed up higher or down low. Just remember, putting locks on the doors or using cameras just means that this is a Band-Aid for a larger problem. So please make sure to consider these as red flags, or that the decline is progressing and it's time to get some outside help as well. So some special techniques for wandering and prevention. Camouflaging posters can make doors look like bookshelves or something other than a door. Maybe the door is painted as the same color as the wallpaper, or maybe there's a plant in front of it. This is used quite often at senior care communities for memory care. A stop or do not enter sign sometimes helps discourage the person from leaving. But again, if you're in your own home, if I could not get out of my condo, I might be willing to break a doorknob to try and get out, right? So that level of panic of being stuck and confined for somebody who doesn't have memory decline is very much amplified to a tremendous degree if they're trying to get out. So we want to ask where they're going and why. A story I always tell is when I was at the Encinitas community in the social worker position, we had this resident who kept trying to dig himself out under the fence. So I finally asked him, you know, let's call his name Bob. Bob, where are you going? And he looked at me and he said, oh, my glasses are broken. I have to go fix them, right? So trying to find out that trigger behind the behavior, sometimes we can alleviate some of their distress and help keep them safer. Loosely fitting doorknob covers, right? Sometimes this helps. Again, that could increase their frustration, and you'll know pretty immediately if this is going to be helpful or not. Other home safety devices for wandering prevention. So locking the gates around the yard, a place to wander safely. So maybe leaving the back door open for them to come in and out, but making sure the fence is secured, right? Because we want to allow them that space that they would normally enjoy. They're used to walking to the mailbox. They're used to walking down the street to say hi to the neighbor, and all of a sudden they're in this really tiny box. So as much space as you can provide, that will help with their anxiety as well. Announcing systems, right? Those nice little ding chimes that happen when doors open. That's very common. It's not unusual, and it shouldn't put them on the alert. Latches that limit how much a window can be open. Lights that come on automatically in the dark, right? especially with memory decline, our ability to perceive depth changes quickly, as does much of our motor and our abilities to see and perceive and be a part of our environment. So lights in general, adding more lights to the hallways, especially in the evening time if they are wandering more in those sundowning or the overnight hours, are really important to help reduce fall risk. Stair gates to prevent falls, driveway sensors, or wireless home security systems or motion sensors. So that way it helps to notify you when they're getting up at night. Okay, this is always a stress-inducing slide, enlisting neighborhood help, right? And if you are experiencing this and you haven't yet, you've got this pit in your stomach of, oh no, I could never, right? So this might not be something anybody's ever wanted to talk about, but it's really important for the situation so that other people can be a part of this, right? If your neighbor was having difficulty and they were scared to reach out to you if they were going through this, I would hope that we would want them to ask for assistance, right? They're not going to be this miracle worker. They're not going to do anything too drastic, but you want somebody to be there in case, you know, your loved one is walking down the street, just so they can call you and ask for help, right? So if they have a tendency to wander, just giving your neighbors a quick heads up that they're having some confusion and they need a little bit of TLC, just to contact you. It doesn't have to be anything specific. You can also put up your boundaries and say, I can't talk about this any further, but I just need help with this right now. And if you can do that, this would be very much appreciated. Okay, so let's talk about real quick how pacing can lead to wandering. Pacing is very much a deliberate behavior that can be a sign of anxiety, distress, overstimulation of noise or social interaction, dehydration of pain. As I mentioned earlier, this could be occur during a party or a large group activity. So just important to not ignore pacing. It is a sign of an unmet need and something that we can address immediately. So some precautions and planning ahead as much as possible. In the event that a person is wandering and becomes lost, it's important to act quickly and have a plan and know who to call for assistance. So for example, ensuring friends and neighbors know who to contact if they see the person out by themselves, giving them your personal cell phone, keeping an updated photo and a list of places where they're most likely to wander or where they frequent, such as past job locations, restaurants, or other favorite places around your neighborhood. Could be a grocery store or a favorite coffee shop. And those who are experiencing wandering are going to find it difficult. We will find it difficult to help them because their behavior is going to be very unpredictable. They might not call for help. They might not even respond to somebody calling their name, right? So somebody calling their name, they might think that person's trying to do them harm and they may hide. You can also contact the Medic Alert Foundation to learn about the various emergency response services and membership plans they offer in the websites here. So that'll be in your slides handout. Okay, so for those of us who are working at a care community or perhaps volunteering or perhaps we're a family member there, these are some ideas of how to prevent wandering at these communities. So at the time of admission, if we're working there, we want to be asking the new resident's family if they have a history of wandering and about their patterns of wandering. This is not something that anybody wants to be very open about. So please make this conversation very comfortable and at ease for them. You can also say, we are used to this. This is a normal part of the disease process, as you've heard in this presentation, and just so that they're more willing to share with you details, which could be concerning, and they might think you might not want to accept their loved one due to that. Staff can familiarize themselves with the new resident through assessments or lifestyle biographies. We want to know their history, what they enjoy or have enjoyed in the past. When you hear those things that, oh, mom used to paint or she used to garden, but she hasn't done that for many years. That's a great opportunity of something that we can help them with, or even do hand over hand if they're past the point where they're able to assist themselves with that anymore. Also, of course, designing individualized care plans or activities that are meaningful and appropriate for the person. Additionally, to reduce confusion for new move-ins and existing residents, all the destinations should be clearly marked. So we have names for the dining rooms or different neighborhoods or the bathrooms. Bathrooms can be marked with a picture of the toilet, like I mentioned about home support as well. Residents' names can be marked on the door with large prints. Some communities, such as at Silverado, we have memory boxes where families and residents can place a lot of their achievements, photos of families, and it helps them orient to where they're at and show more of their identity. Because in essence, they're just happen to be living with dementia. It's not defining who they are. This is just unfortunately a part of their journey of their life right now. We also want to make sure to take extra caution during shift changes, as residents might be more apt to depart the community if we are in meetings. So those AM, PM, or the PM overnight shift changes, making sure that someone's available to assist anybody who is having any exit-seeking behaviors. We can also schedule special activities that are engaging during shift changes. I know quite a few communities will have happy hours or perhaps live entertainment for a big group, where one person might be able to watch a little bit more residents for that half hour or so. New residents, as we're seeing, a lot of residents and individuals are being diagnosed much earlier. And especially in Orange County, I heard a statistic recently that Orange County is the 6th largest 65 and over population in the United States right now. So we are going to have this influx at communities, especially with the baby boomers as they age. So making sure that those 50s, 60s residents in those age groups who are coming in, we want to post photos because they can be very easily confused with a family member or a spouse, perhaps. We want to use really gentle methods when responding to wandering. This isn't the time to panic. People will read your body language and your facial expressions. So remaining calm, approaching them from the front, so not coming up behind them and tapping them on the shoulder, which is going to startle anybody at that point. We want to speak in a very soft, slow, comforting voice, right? Unless they're very hearing impaired and they don't want to wear their hearing aids, which you might have to speak a little bit louder. But in general, we want to smile. We want to show them that we are friendly and help them trust us quickly in that situation. Never, ever, never, physical restraints are not an option. This can cause a premature loss of ambulation, weakness, poor circulation, incontinence, and just overall poor quality of life. Very similarly, chemical restraints such as medications are not an option as they increase the likelihood and risk of balance issues, sedation, falls. Very serious side effects can occur such as paranoia and hallucinations. And like I've mentioned, there's normally always a validating behavior trigger that's behind something, right? They're looking for someone. They're scared, they're trying to go to work, they're looking for their spouse, trying to find food. So all those things that we've discussed in this previous slides. Additionally, we want to help distract and redirect, focusing on their attention on something they have a special interest in or a new goal, right? So after we've validated what their fear is, right? We've said we've helped them figure out maybe their young child is still at school, right? Right now it's 12:09 and perhaps they're at your kids at lunch. So while we're waiting for them, so we can wait for them to pick them up later, maybe we can go and have some lunch ourselves, right? So making sure that we're helping them stay in their comforts of their reality. And you can just imagine how scary it would be. I'm sure most of you are viewing from your office or perhaps a room in your house. If somebody told you right now that you are at a physician's office and you're not actually at an office at your workplace or at your home, and they are very adamant about that and trying to pull you out of that reality, that's going to drastically increase our anxiety, right? Because now nothing's making sense, and now we're on panic and we're in fight or flight mode. Okay, so it's very simple things. If they're hungry, ready for a snack, if they want to look at photos or listen to music, it's really important for that music therapy piece that we use very often at Silverado. The music that occurs in our lifetime between the ages of 12 and 25. That's a really important time, and that type of music is very, it elicits a lot of warm and joyful responses. So making sure to ask families, or if we are the family ourselves, to provide music that is very comforting for them. It can be a tremendous redirection technique all in itself. If there's a secured area, again, if a person needs to walk, we want to walk with them. There's no need for them to sit down. They should have the freedom to get up and be mobile as they used to be on their own. So when wandering is a daily routine for a resident, and this could be something that's long-term during the disease process or more of a temporary stint, there are some types of dementias that will cause excessive walking. So if they do have that desire to walk, we want to implement plans of care. So we want to make sure they're hydrated. We want to provide finger foods or something they can snack on, right? A bowl of spaghetti and sauce that's going to go all over and is really hard to hang on to is not going to be as easily attainable for the resident to enjoy, instead of perhaps some raviolis or a meatball that they can hold on to, or a sandwich, for example, to keep them nourished. So sturdy shoes are very important. Yes, we all love slippers. Yes, we all want to be comfortable, especially in California. I know those flip-flops are really exciting, but sturdy shoes, anything we can do to help stabilize our older loved ones is going to make the difference for them. Chairs, making sure we have chairs that are available for them to sit down and rest. Also making sure that there's chairs they can get out of. So with the 3-point chairs that have the armrest on them, it's very disorienting for a loved one to get up out of a chair that can roll. It very much hinders their balance and their ability to know where they're at in space physically. Okay, so getting towards the end, wrap up here. So what are we going to do if a person is missing? Of course, we want to act as quickly as possible because this missing person may walk quickly or find another mode of transportation. If you're at home and the person's left, you're going to act immediately. Most assisted living communities are going to have some sort of elopement policies and procedures in place. At Silverado, we have a call on our walkies that we're going to alert everybody. We're going to look for 10 minutes, check every restroom, bathroom, every single place where somebody could be. Then we're going to move from there in notifying law enforcement and other authorities. So notifying the police, this should be treated as an emergency. If they have that bracelet, that's an identifier. Also, we can alert them of that. Most states tend to have a silver alert public notification system to broadcast info about missing persons. So we also want to check with the neighbors, local shops, restaurants. Know the dangerous areas around first. So if there's a busy intersection or a creek or a valley, a canyon behind your house, factories, overpasses, bridges, we've encountered residents moving to our Silverado communities who have been picked up on the freeway. There's multiple freeways in Southern California, and they are sometimes more prevalent than the side streets. So we want to be able to check those immediately and first. And I'm sure you'll have the group of people around you, whether it's friends or family, who can come to support you very quickly during this time. Again, other additional supports, having photographs, a recent headshot, updating the list of their features, so their age, their gender, height, weight, blood type, dental work, anything else that might be very important for them to know. Health conditions, medications, dietary needs, if they're diabetic or not. It's going to make a big difference in finding them quicker. Also, you can keep an unwashed article of the person's clothing kept in a sealed bag, put in there with gloved hands so we're not adding our smells on top of it. And this can greatly help if there's any police dogs that are included in the search. And then again, that list that we would be giving the neighbors as well of where they're most likely to frequent in the surrounding areas. Well, thankfully, we live in a wonderfully advancing technological era that wants to track everything and everybody. So there are quite a few devices and resources for preventing wandering. Of course, the basic technology that are very simple and not going to be noticed too much by our loved ones would be those ID bracelets as shown here. So for example, the medic alert, as we mentioned, clothing labels can be attached to assist in if they need to be identified. Please, please, please put them on the inside of their clothes. It's very, we don't even want to put names on our children's backpacks anymore. So we certainly don't want to do this for our older adults who we want to keep their dignity intact for as long as possible. So anywhere that can be, you know, on the inside of the cuff of their sleeve, most of the time just right on the tag is good enough and somebody can look at that. Other technologies that use GPS, personal tracking devices, so those GPS smartwatches, get a new one for Christmas for your loved one, right? Apple or Garmin or whichever ones you have now. Wristbands, necklaces, keychains, any wearable devices that attach to clothing. We've even had loved ones move in and say, here's a pair of shoes. It's got a tile on it. And if you know what a tile is, it's this little tiny square that tracks to an app on our phone. And their loved one thinks it's just part of the branding of the shoe. So they have tiles and we can track them around the community. It's very fun actually and very stress relieving for all of us, of course. Devices vary from GPS tracking to personal emergency responses. A lot of them do rely on internet, cellular, or radio technology, and sometimes there's two-way communication and fall detections as well in some of the newer devices. So again, those watches and wristbands can be great for those who are comfortable wearing a watch and not inclined to remove it, right? So that favorite watch that they wore every day for work, we're just adding to that habit for them. It's less likely to get lost than perhaps a key fob or a device and can be a lot less stigmatizing than having a lanyard around their neck or a medical alert device for them. Other GPS technologies, which I think are very cool, a GPS insole that can be put into almost any shoe. So this actually connects cellularly to send location updates to this monitoring system. So you can check out that website as well. And of course, our smartphones, if you can turn on the tracking ability or have that Find My Phone app, if you're an iPhone user, available, most of the time they're at no cost. So you can check in with your cell phone provider if you have more questions on those, or Google. Google will tell you anything you need to know. Okay, so some just last minute additional resources. Again, it's been such a pleasure to participate again. You can also reach out to UCI Mind, the ADRC, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and their website's included here. If you're interested in coming to a support group, you don't have to have a loved one at our community. It's every third Wednesday of the month from 10 to 11 a.m., but you can contact me at this email or my personal work phone to ask about support groups, or if you just need more information, love to talk to you some more about how to support your loved one either at home. We do have a day program where they can come for a few hours during the day if they're in those early stages through our Flex and our Nexus programs. And so here's our website as well if you have any more questions. And thank you. It's been a privilege to be here with all of you today.
Thank you so much, Erin, for that extremely useful topic. And that topic never goes away, does it? Erin and I were talking this morning about how, you know, over the years, the disease trajectory doesn't really change. It's individual to everyone who goes through it, but there are certain common things that have been going on forever, and wandering is one of them. So it's really great that people can educate themselves and learn more tips from you, Erin. Thank you so much. Now, we have come to the time in our presentation where we're going to be taking questions. So if you haven't already done so, you can go ahead and pop a question into the question box for Erin. And before we get to them, I just want to, in case we run over, thank our sponsors and tell you all about our next webinar. So once again, grateful thanks and appreciation go out to our wonderful community partners, O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, Caring Companions at Home, and Home Base, Alzheimer's Orange County. And please mark your calendars for our next webinar, and the date of that is Tuesday, July 12th at 11:30 Pacific time. And another really valuable topic, fall prevention for older adults. And we actually have two presenters coming out from Washington State, the Washington State Department of Health. We have Lori Cleary and Alan Abe. And so Laura Bronson has secured some out-of-state expertise for us, and we appreciate that, Laura. So make sure, again, save that date of Tuesday, July 12th. Just a reminder that if we go over, we encourage all of you to stay with us, and then when we end the webinar, that evaluation that we talked about will pop up automatically for you. If you do have to leave before that, you will get it in your emails. And you turn that back around to us quickly within 24 hours, and then we'll be able to process your certificates and get those out as soon as possible. Let's see. Oh yeah, if you want to learn more about who we are and what we do, and perhaps research other education programs as well as supportive services, go to our website at www.alzoc.org. All right, so let me just open up the question box and see what we have for you, Miss Erin. Okay.
I'm ready.
You know, so we have a couple questions about pacing, but one is just a general question. What do you mean by pacing? What does that look like?
Pacing normally is at a bit quicker of a speed. It could be with some more agitation. Perhaps if you're trying to accompany the person or trying to redirect them, they're not connecting with you. They're just in their own head. It's much more nervous induced. It's wandering is just kind of going around wherever. There's not really a stress to it too much, unless they're pushing on a door and can't get out, of course. But pacing is very much induced by stress and anxiety or some unmet need, basically.
Okay. And similarly, if pacing is sort of a behavior related to the past, is it still never to be ignored and still likely to be a sign of an unmet need?
So just from professional experience, if it's related to the past, oftentimes we still want to help this individual. So you and I, if we have the ability to talk ourselves off the wall, we will. So somebody who has some disconnected brain cells and isn't able to talk themselves off the wall, they're going to remain in this very heightened state of anxiety or fear. And it's, to be honest, not fair for them to be in that if we can help them. So many people are on even anti-anxieties or antidepressants. Those are a lot easier to go towards than antipsychotics at first. Sometimes if you know that your loved one was just always had this low level of anxiety throughout their whole life, a lot of times we'll see that overly expressed once the decline hits because they can no longer filter that out for themselves. So
okay, good. I'm thinking too, just people may be having a little trouble distinguishing between pacing and wandering. And so for me, pacing is a behavior that as long as the person is safe, you know, for example, if they have meaningful wandering corridors or a safe place to do that, it's not always a behavior we want to worry about or stop. But wandering, on the other hand, is goal driven usually. And so
Right.
if they think I mean, I had a truck driver once who thought he was supposed to be back east, and he actually
Mm-hmm.
managed to hitchhike with other truckers all the way back east. I mean, he was
Oh my.
just driven to do that. So
Yeah.
I don't know, does that make sense to sort of distinguish it as pacing is something they might do to self-soothe or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
we can keep an eye on them, but if they're wandering, then that's dangerous, and it's usually pretty purposeful.
Right.
Just, yeah, okay. What is it called when we enter into their reality? And the example, I guess, was wandering and looking for a child.
Yeah, so we want to validate what they're going through. We call it therapeutic retelling. So we have some residents at our community. We had one beautiful lady. She thought she was on a cruise. Now, if I'm at that age, I would love to be on a cruise at a senior living community if I have memory decline. I think that would be the best of both worlds. But who are we to tell her that she's not on a cruise, right? So just asking her more questions, or maybe if they think they're at their old childhood home, well, where's your home? Where'd you grow up? Tell me about that. Oh, you were on a farm. How, did you get to take care of the animals? And just ask more questions, because what they're telling us, those are the memories that are still intact, and we want them to rehearse those, because that's something that they can offer to the conversation too.
Perfect. Let's see. Oh, this is a great question. How do you decide, in other words, at what point is it no longer safe for them to be alone? And how do you know when it's time for 24-hour care for them, whether it's in the home or in a community? So how do you know, Erin?
Yeah, yeah. It's the age-old question. I think if you're having to ask, it's time. First, unfortunately, the brain is the one organ in the body that, if it's affected, we spend the most time procrastinating about. And I'm not just talking about moving into a care community, but just help in general. So let's say one of your lungs or heart, or you've got cancer. You're going to go to the doctor, you're going to get an opinion, you're going to see a specialist, you might get a second opinion, and then you're going to act on treatment. So unfortunately, because of the long-standing stigma of nursing homes and not wanting to talk too much like this about Alzheimer's or dementia in general, there's this promise that most of our adult children make to their loved ones of, I told mom I would never move her into a nursing home. So there's this stigma related with it. So if you're having any sort of doubts, that's the time, because ultimately being more proactive is going to help prevent all of these things that you're hearing about. And we never want to have regrets about how well we can proactively take care of our loved one if we already know that it's there.
That's perfect, Erin. And I'm also thinking that you can call our helpline around this
Yes,
topic.
absolutely.
And I believe we have a checklist, just sort of a click in the boxes. And if you have clicked in a lot of boxes, then you know it's time. But
Yes.
a helpful guide, I believe, is available through our helpline. I don't think we have the number up there, do we? Oh, yeah, there
Yeah,
it
it's
is,
on there.
right
Yep,
on our screen.
444.
Yeah,
Yes.
so we encourage you to call the helpline
Yep.
for some of these issues as well. What, Erin, is your suggestion when someone wanders and the family doesn't see it as a problem? I've tried to educate the family and offer suggestions, this attendee says, and the family still believes, oh, well, the client will just come back. Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm. That's a really tough one. And I think it depends on what your relationship is with them. If you are in the family, of course, there's that, love that's thicker than blood, and your duty to help them and provide as much information is always going to be there. However, we can only suggest so much. So we hope, obviously, that it doesn't get to the point where it is dangerous for them. Maybe providing some resources like the Alzheimer's Orange County helpline, checking in with them. It's going to take a lot, probably, but ultimately this revolves around grieving. So unlike other disease processes, if you're losing your memory, you can't talk about it along the way like you can if you're going through other illnesses. And so this is, they're watching their hero decline, their most important person, and it's a very come to grips moment of, if we see those small glimmers of hope there, we want to hang on to those. But this disease, as we've seen, is going to fluctuate wildly. We want our loved ones to have more positive moments than negative moments, and that's the whole goal. But I'm sure you're doing as much as you can. And like I said, if you want to call the Alzheimer's OC helpline, they might have some more resources, or if Kim has any suggestions too.
I'm just thinking, with some of these really delicate, difficult issues, like the one we just discussed, when is it time? Or this one, how do you, educate a family? Support groups, because support groups can be a great remedy for that, because the other group members will talk to that person in a way that we can't, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
We have to
Absolutely.
approach these things very professionally, very delicately. But when they're sitting in a room with other caregivers will be very frank and forthcoming about why that's dangerous. So, yeah, so
absolutely.
hopefully that could help.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, we've already tried that. They refuse a support group. Maybe if you just have another friend or somebody, you could throw a stone in the area and find somebody who is going through a very similar situation. If it's expressed by somebody in that moment, maybe even just a one-on-one phone call or conversation might even get that started too.
That's a great idea, Erin. Let's see, I can take this next one because the person is asking for a checklist of symptoms for early dementia that could help a family member know when to alert the primary care physician of a change in behavior. So we actually have a document called Tracking the Changes. So just, you can call our helpline and we can get that to you, as well as a list of early symptoms, to sort of watch for, that kind of thing. Anything that you would add to that, Erin?
No, I think that's great. If they want to route you to us, we'd be happy to, but that's the perfect place to start.
Okay. Can facilities enforce the use of WanderGuard, or I assume some other mechanism, to residents with wandering risk? Do they still do that?
Can they enforce those? We have a obligation to the state of California as a community to make sure that we can take care of anybody who's within our grounds. So if whether it could be, due to staffing or training, there are communities that do not have the means to take care of people who are experiencing sundowning or wandering. Those behaviors are a little bit out of their scope. So yes, they will be asking you to enforce that. That's not uncommon. They might ask you for a 24/7 caregiver around the clock as well. And that's part of making sure that, they're putting things in place to help support those gaps there. So again, as I mentioned, when you're going to look for communities, you want to be very specific in asking for different behaviors that your loved one's presenting with. Can you handle this? What is your reaction to this? So that way you know up front. And if you have more questions about that, feel free to call myself or Alzheimer's Orange County afterwards.
Yeah, I think too that sometimes family members don't realize how important it is to disclose wandering behavior to a potential memory care community or whatever. And if you have someone who's wandering, then they need to be in a community that has secure perimeters, right?
And if you don't know, if you are not the spouse and you're not living at home with them, ask the spouse to leave the house for about 5 minutes and see what happens. because sometimes it's just an unknown, and maybe they do great with that person that has been their partner for a long time, but the second they are out of sight, it is a whole new world.
Yeah. Thank you, Erin. Let's see if we have anything else. Someone wants to know if they get a copy of the slides. Yes, they should have already been emailed to you, or you can go right now to the handouts section and click on that arrow to the side and just click on the handouts, and they'll go to your printer. Let's see. Compliments, compliments, compliments. Do you have policies and procedures for residents whose family want those GPS trackers? And who is in charge of having the app? Oh, so here we're talking about like boarding care or a facility where a community where the family wants to get the GPS trackers for their individual resident, right?
I think that's just an individual discussion. So far, there's not specific state level guidelines that we've heard about so far. But again, it's whatever is within the scope of the community. At our community, for example, like I mentioned, we have one or two of those tiles or the GPS watches. The family has the GPS watches. I don't need to have that. But if they were getting out, then I would want to have that on my phone. I do have the tiles on my phone. I have that for our pets as well. So anything that could get out of our community, it's just easier for whoever's close. And I just happen to live the closest. I'm about a mile from where I work, so I can get there in an emergency. So somebody who's available most of the time would be the best to have that around.
That's reassuring. Can you give an example of what you would say to a patient who is wandering due to their anxiety about their young children's safety or location? So I think you did that. Do you want to review that quickly again, or?
Sure. Yeah. So I again, whatever the reality is, so find something that sounds logical, right? If it's on the weekend, if it's a Saturday or Sunday, you can even ask them, what would your child normally be doing right now? So if they think about it and they can say something like, oh, they're probably out with their friends, you can validate that and say, I think that's right. I think you told me they were going out with their friends. Why don't we go do this, and we'll check in with them in a little bit, and maybe you can redirect them. If it's during the week, if they're a young child, they should be in school, unless it's after work. If their spouse or somebody other significant that would be taking care of that child, you can also say, oh, they went out to do some errands with dad. They'll be back in a little bit, right? So we want to keep that flow of logic of something that would have occurred in that time and space for them, so that they can have some assurance.
Great, thank you. There's a question about showering and they're refusing help, and I'd like you to call whoever asked that question. If you'd be kind enough to call the helpline, we can assist you with that. Erin, can you speak a little bit more about gentle redirection when communicating with someone with dementia?
Sure, of course. You know, our seniors have been through a lot in their lives. They have had a lot of large identities, whether it's family or work, and they really do deserve to have that respect and dignity. So if they're sitting down, standing over them and talking to them isn't going to be the greatest. So even sitting down next to them, make sure that you're still at eye level. Sometimes a gentle touch. There are some types of dementias that will elicit a strong reaction to pull back. Huntington's disease, sometimes Lewy bodies, there is a tendency to not want to have that level of affection, but a lot of times multiple sensories, you know, touching their hand, making sure that your body language is open, having your hands held out to them, a smile, letting them talk and letting them process. So if you're going to ask a question, open-ended questions are very difficult for them to grasp those abstract thoughts and put them back into a conversation. So at our community, for example, when we're asking our residents, instead of saying, what would you like to wear today? We might pick out their 2 favorite items out of the closet and say, which one of these that we're showing you visually, right? So that's another sense. Which one of these would you like? So there's less options, but we're still giving them that choice and that ability for independence as well. I would recommend listening to what they're saying. If they're sad, smiling at them and trying to make them feel better isn't going to help. We want to reflect their facial expressions as much as possible. If you have to, frown, or, if it's difficult for you and you're just trying to wait for them to stop talking so you can try and make them feel better, it's not going to help. So you can just sometimes simply just say, can I sit with you? Can I walk around with you? Not everything has to be planned out. We have a lot of families who come in and they want to be busy all the time, but when you're sitting at home with your loved one, sometimes you're just reading a book, or you're sitting out on the back patio and having some soda and watching the birds fly around, right? It doesn't have to be this thought out activities all the time. It could just be some quiet silence, walking around, holding hands. We tell our families to go find all the pets in the community, because we've got cats and birds and dogs, and there's grandkids running around. So just very simple things that you can do in parallel, and just being there for them, just like, we would want somebody to be there for us too.
That's a wonderful answer, Erin. You're just a fountain of knowledge, and we've really appreciated having you today. I'm going to just ask one more question, and then we're going to have to end because we have run over, and you're gracious to stay with us. The question is, could you repeat the time and date of your webinars? It says, Erin, would you please be so kind to repeat what time of day and month you hold your webinars?
So we have support groups. We do have those support groups on Zoom and in person. In general, they're normally the third Wednesday of the month, but just send me an email and I'll be happy to send you the flyers for those. We have multiple support groups at our location. So we have a faith-based one. We have a monthly webinar that's company-wide that I present for general public, but if you're in the area and you'd like to attend in person, you can as well. And then my Director of Resident and Family Services, Casey Lambert, who also has a master's in gerontology, she has an educational support group once a month as well. So we'd be happy to give you more details on that anytime.
Oh, all excellent resources. And if you're inquiring about our webinars, they take place monthly on the second Tuesday at 11:30 Eastern Time. I also want to mention quickly, if anyone is interested in receiving an application to the Medic Alert Found program, we have those available through the helpline as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and thank you once again for your expertise and your time. Thank our sponsors again for their generosity, and thank all of you, our attendees. Many of you come every month, and I know we also have a lot of new folks today too. So great to have you all along. Watch for the evaluation to pop up once I end the webinar, and have a wonderful day, all of you. Thank you so much, Erin. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.